Let's talk about GetPivotData. It's a formula to get data from pivot tables, and I'm going to show my bias, and I'm going to tell you I think it's more annoying than anything else, but it does have one very good and specific use. But first of all, let's check out what's going on. What I have here is a really simple database with invoice in column A, sales in column B, region in column C. Not a big deal. I created a pivot table that summarizes sales by region. And now let's suppose that I have a task and that I have to increase everything for a forecast. Let's pretend I have to increase everything by 25%. So I need to multiply all of these by 1.25. So over in H3, right next to it, if I type in equals, if I click inside a data point in a pivot table, I get this GetPivotData with all these parameters. I can multiply times 1.25, so that'll increase it by 25%. Now if I drag it down, I still have the same number. I want 25% or 125% of this, 125% of that, but this GetPivotData doesn't change. So what is it doing? Well, first of all, it is getting obviously data from a pivot table from sales. This F2 is the top left of the pivot table, so that kind of tells Excel which pivot table to focus on. If you have 3 or 4 of them, this is what tells Excel which pivot table the data comes from. The region, which is what we have here, and then the East region. So even if I drag it down, I'm still going to have the East region. So I would actually have to change this to North within the quotations if I wanted to get the North region. But if I'm going to have to do that, then what's the whole point of using GetPivotData, right? You can just type in, instead of this whole GetPivotData, you can type in G3. Let me move this out of the way so you can see. So this is really in G3. So yeah, I can type in G3, which is really what I want, and then I can drag it down. Now it works, right? Because I'm looking at G5. So the one workaround is you can actually type in the formula. The other thing that I don't like about GetPivotData is if I filter something out, let me undo this because I want to show you what I mean by that. So in this GetPivotData, I'm undoing a couple of levels. Here we go. If I would ever move region out of the pivot table and put like salesperson if I had it or something like that, such that region is not visible, the GetPivotData will give me an NA. So GetPivotData will only work for cells that are currently visible in the pivot table, and you can't drag them down. It's quite annoying. It's kind of like a VLOOKUP only on visible cells. Okay. I'm going to show you how to get rid of GetPivotData. But before we get rid of it, the only time that I have used GetPivotData and liked it is when I have a cell. Let's say I'm just going to go over to G2. I type in equals and I want the total sum of the sales. Now that will give me 443, 447. It will give me the total, correct? So this is kind of like a VLOOKUP. And it will always give me the grand total. So if I come over here and I type in 0109, I'm skipping a number, it doesn't really matter. Wait, I need it to be text, so it's single quote 0109 to keep it in text. And I'm going to put in, I don't know, 50 bucks. And we'll do it in international, right? Let's make up a new region. Since a pivot table is sourced from this data table, which expanded, as soon as I hit refresh, I have one extra row, but I still have the right total. So in this particular case, when you're looking at grand totals, either of columns or rows, That's where GetPivotData does become useful, because now you don't have to do like a VLOOKUP for grand total or a match. You can just use GetPivotData. Apart from that, I don't like it. And this is how you get rid of it. First of all, I'm going to delete this GetPivotData right here. You only have to do this once. In Excel, go to File, go to Options, go to Formulas, and right here in the second section where it says Working with Formulas, uncheck Use GetPivotData functions for pivot table references. So you clear that bad boy out and you click on OK. Now look what happens. Or when I'm in H3, when I point to this, I don't have the GetPivotData. I just have G3. And now I can do my 1.25 and drag it down. But this GetPivotData that I still have, it still works. But if you ever want to use GetPivotData for a total, you have to turn it back on, do the pointing, or learn the syntax, and then turn it off. But it really helps to now be able to point to a cell in a pivot table and not have that static GetPivotData. And that has been your tip for today. See you in the next video.